She made a covenant of 3 boons, yet his initial request shattered the composure of the demon goddess. The inner sanctum of the sanctuary shrieked at Julian Rhodes across 15 distinct wavelengths. Radiation alerts painted his optical visor a deep crimson. Proximity sensors lamented the structural collapse. The atmosphere itself possessed an unsettling flavor, heavy with microscopic matter that fundamentally defied natural existence. He disregarded every warning, his fingers meticulously working the photonic cutting tool along the final perimeter of the seal. Just a little longer, he murmured, perspiration trickling into his eyes despite the suit's environmental regulation. The ancient barrier predated human civilization by a factor of 10. Intricate geometrical patterns spiraled across its face, each etching resonating with residual power that sent an ache through his jaw. Every university ethics committee, every coalition safety mandate, every shred of inherent prudence screamed at him to cease. The entire celestial body was under strict quarantine for a valid reason. 12 prior exploratory missions had vanished on this spot without a single trace. Julian's cutting beams sliced through the last millimeter of the archaic alloy. The seal did not fracture, it emitted a soundless screech. Reality itself began to shred. The noise completely bypassed his auditory canals, vibrating instead through his skeletal structure, his cranium, the very tissue of his brain. The geometric designs flared an incandescent white, then fractured into light that should be thermodynamically impossible. The temple structure seized up, rock grinding against rock in a rhythm that eerily resembled respiration. The air immediately before the ruined barrier began to incinerate. Not with typical flame, but with sheer imposing presence. The spatial dimensions, folded, compressed, defied the established principles of physics with casual indifference. Heat washed over Julian in scorching torrents, causing his suit's internal cooling system to loudly protest. The scorching air coalesced, condensed, and assumed the form of organic matter. She materialized as if a weapon was being unsheathed. Crimson flesh, the precise hue of arterial flow, caught the fading illumination of the temple. Ebon horns curved gracefully away from her scalp in elegant arcs, their polished surface absorbing all light. Pale markings traced elaborate motifs across her shoulders, her collarbone vanishing beneath dark material that adhered to contours that caused Julian's breath to seize. Long strands of black hair cascaded past her hips, stirring in a breeze that possessed no physical origin. Her eyes snapped open, a color of molten gold, ancient and devoid of all mercy. Julian's lower limbs ceased to function. He dropped heavily onto the stone floor, the cutter slipping from his numb grasp. She stretched, and the movement was imbued with the lethal grace of a predator. Joints popped with noises like shattering geological formations. The air surrounding her warped with thermal distortion, and when she expelled breath, a mist formed despite the suffocating heat within the temple. Finally she articulated, her voice sounding like the whisper of fine silk drawn over sharp steel. Her stare located Julian, pinning him to the ground beneath the immense weight of something vast, prehistoric, and utterly outside human comprehension. She advanced one step. The rock beneath her bare feet fractured under the concentrated temperature. "You are the one who released me," she continued, her head tilting as she evaluated him with the detached interest of an academic observing an insect. "How pathetically fragile you appear." Julian's mouth moved, but no sound escaped. She began to circle him slowly, each stride deliberately measured. The fabric of her garment rustled softly against her thighs. Up close he could discern that the white symbols on her skin were not merely surface paint. They extended deep, appearing like glyphs carved into her fundamental being. Her sheer presence pressed against his consciousness, immense and terrifying, yet perfectly restrained. "Can you speak, small scholar, or did the sight of me break something within that underdeveloped skull?" Julian's voice cracked. He swallowed, forcing himself to speak again. "Who exactly are you?" Her lips curled into something that might have been classified as a smile had it contained any genuine warmth whatsoever. "I have been referred to by many titles: goddess, fiend, destroyer, commander of the final legion, keeper of the diminishing illumination." She lowered herself into a crouch directly before him, bringing her visage level with his. Her eyes were pools of liquid gold shot through with specks of color for which no human lexicon possessed names. "But you may refer to me as Sarath. You have earned that much by severing my confinement." The barrier Julian managed to utter. "I truly was unaware." "Naturally you were unaware." Sarath extended a hand, and Julian recoiled involuntarily. Her fingertips, tipped with nails like highly polished volcanic glass, caught his chin. She rotated his head from side to side as if inspecting an article of trade. Her skin burned against his. "They never are. 12 missions prior to yours. All attracted by either inquisitiveness or avarice or simple foolishness. All deceased before reaching this inner chamber. But you." Her thumb grazed his cheekbone. "You're different. Motivated enough to violate every prohibition. Proficient enough to overcome the temple's security measures. obsessed enough to dismiss all reason. She released him standing in a single fluid motion. The decrees of the binding are ancient, Sarath declared, her voice adopting a ceremonial formality. Older than your species, older than the majority of societies in this spiral galaxy. I was sealed away under conditions that cannot be annulled, only relocated. You liberated me, therefore a debt is owed to you. She raised 3 fingers and they appeared to physically sever the atmosphere. 3 requests, little scholar. 3 desires I am compelled to satisfy before the covenant discharges me and I may depart this desolate world. Julian's thoughts raced. 3 wishes. The substance of fables and human folklore he had studied in basic university courses a lifetime ago. Except this was unequivocally real. She was real. The thermal energy radiating from her existence was real. The temple surrounding them still settling from her emergence was real. What exactly can you? He paused, regrouping his inquiry. What are the limitations? An intelligent inquiry. Sarath's predatory smile intensified. I cannot commit murder directly. The binding explicitly forbids it. I cannot bestow eternal life upon you. That exceeds even my formidable capabilities. But profound knowledge, boundless wealth, technology your kind will not conceive of, for millennia the demise of your adversaries through carefully arranged circumstance, a sovereign position. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper of intimacy. Sensory gratification beyond anything your restrictive biology was engineered to withstand. All of these lie within my jurisdiction. She straightened and her tone reverted to its earlier condescending note. I have granted these wishes innumerable times before. I understand precisely what your species desires. You will undoubtedly request influence first. They invariably do. Perhaps the secrets of faster-than-light propulsion or weaponry capable of ensuring your people's supremacy. Or perhaps your more primal desires for material possessions. Maybe a multitude of willing companions molded to your precise specification. Her eyes narrowed. Exercise caution in your selection. The binding does not permit me to deny your wish, but it also does not prevent me from fulfilling your desires in ways you will severely regret. Julian fixed his gaze upon her. He truly observed her. Beneath the raw power, beneath the predatory elegance and the crushing presence, he perceived something further. The way her shoulders were held too rigidly, the absolute restraint visible in every subtle facial shift, the deliberate space she maintained from everything surrounding her, as if any form of connection represented a grave peril. He had dedicated 15 years to studying deceased civilizations. He understood the visual manifestation of profound sorrow even when it spanned 10,000 years. I wish, Julian articulated slowly, each word measured to genuinely comprehend what you endured when your civilization perished. The ambient temperature within the temple immediately spiked 20 degrees. Sarath's eyes widened, the first genuine emotional reaction he had witnessed on her face. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. Her hands, which had been so meticulously controlled, began to tremble visibly. What did you just say? Her voice had become dangerously quiet. Your people, Julian persisted, forcing himself upright despite his trembling legs. I observed the ruins en route here. This entire world, it is an immense burial ground. A society that governs solar systems reduced to empty structures and absolute silence. I want to fully grasp the implication of that. What was the true price? What precisely did you suffer? No. The word shot out sharp as a cutting edge. Select something different. That is my wish. You fundamentally misunderstand what you are requesting. Then assist me in comprehending. That is the objective. Sarath's controlled demeanor, maintained for epochs and perfected over eons of isolation, completely fractured. Her hands tightened into rigid fists. The pale markings etched into her skin began to radiate, throbbing with illumination that intensified with every labored inhalation she took. You unbelievably ignorant fool. She lunged ahead, gripping his shoulders forcefully enough to cause bruising even through the protective suit. Her face was mere inches from his, and he could observe her pupils rapidly dilating, then contracting, losing all fixed focus. You have absolutely no conception of what you are demanding that I experience. To recollect, to articulate. I have sequestered it away for 5 millennia. 5,000 years of absolute silence, of iron control, of— She emitted a broken gasp, a sound so shattered it caused a sharp ache in Julian's chest. The covenant immediately activated. Golden radiance erupted from the ruptured seal, enveloping both of them like restraints forged from pure, compelling obligation. Sarath attempted to tear herself free, but the light held her firmly in place. Her entire physique became rigidly still. No, she whispered, please, not this. Anything but this. But the ancient decree was unmoved. It never had been. Sarath's hand, moving against her own will, pressed flatly against Julian's chest plate. Her other hand ascended to his temporal region. The golden light surged, becoming overwhelmingly blinding. Julian felt her consciousness collide with his own like a devastating tidal wave. The psychic conduit forcefully tore open and abruptly he was drowning in her entirety. Memories that were not his own cascaded through his awareness. Cities of impossible aesthetic beauty, towering spires that kissed the atmospheric boundary, bustling marketplaces filled with entities whose joyous vocalizations chimed like harmonious music. He absorbed her profound happiness at guiding her populace, her immense pride in their collective achievements, her fierce, unyielding devotion for every single being under her governance. And then he experienced their annihilation. But the connection had not established a unidirectional pathway. Sarath's eyes widened in shock as Julian's own emotional spectrum surged back into her mind. His profound empathy, his sincere desire for knowledge, his deep-seated reverence for vanished civilizations and the individuals who had established them, his sorrow freshly triggered for her immense loss. She was subjected to raw, unadulterated human emotion for the very first time in her interminable existence. Her practiced composure entirely disintegrated. Sarath's legs gave way. They collapsed together onto the stone floor, still bound within the embrace of the golden light, and the immense temple structure surrounding them began to awaken. Ancient mechanisms responded to her breaking control. Lights flickered into existence throughout the sprawling edifice. Somewhere deep within, colossal engines initiated movement. I cannot, Sarath's voice fractured. I absolutely cannot endure this. I can't. But she was compelled to. The ancient covenant demanded compliance. And as the wish achieved its full effect, forcefully dragging both of them into the most profound chambers of her anguish, Sarath began to weep for the first time in 5,000 years. The sound of her despair echoed through the temple like a solemn, funereal lament. The memories arrived in relentless surges. Julian gasped as Sarath's history flooded through the psychic link. The capital city materialized before him. Towers of meticulously polished stone reflecting the illumination of twin suns. Verdant gardens suspended between the colossal structures. Yet it was not the sheer splendor that struck him most powerfully. It was the abundance of life. People thronged the thoroughfares. Sarath species. Taller than human beings. Skin tones ranging from deep crimson to burnished copper. They laughed. They truly lived. Younglings chased one another through the market squares. Musicians performed upon instruments that resonated with complex, ethereal harmonics causing a deep ache in his chest. Stop. Sarath's voice emerged utterly strangled. The binding would not permit her cessation. Julian felt Sarath's inherent pride as she strode through those same streets in her ceremonial armor. Commander of the last legion. A small child rushed up, pressed a delicate flower into her armored hand, and darted off, dissolving in giggles. Julian's emotions surged back to her. His immense awe, his grief, his genuine reverence. Sarath made a choked sound as if physically assaulted. The binding intensified its glow. Her command center displays illustrating troop deployments across countless star systems. Her legion numbered in the millions. I was highly competent at it, Sarath whispered through the link. So very competent at maintaining their safety. Then the void. Initial reports on a tranquil morning. A distant colony completely silenced. Everyone deceased. Not casualties of combat. Merely dead. Hundreds of thousands immediately fallen. The contagion, Sarath transmitted. That is what I initially believed it to be. More colonies fell. Then entire cities. Her legion was mobilized. Strict quarantines implemented. Settlements were incinerated. Nothing proved effective. Her people perished in overwhelming waves. Julian experienced her mounting desperation, felt her crippling exhaustion, shared her visceral horror as billions died, and absorbed her crushing guilt, the immense culpability of a sworn protector who ultimately failed. I should have preserved them. Julian's pervasive empathy surged back again. Sarath shook convulsively against him. The golden light intensified until his suit's internal systems screamed in protest. The definitive final day arrived. Sarath stood completely alone in her deserted command center. Every single display indicated silence. Every city darkened. Every colony void of life. The very last of her kind. Julian felt the profound realization strike her, felt her limbs collapse, felt her mind catastrophically fragment. She had screamed a sound that shattered the reinforced viewports, then wept uncontrollably for days, weeks, entirely encircled by the deceased. Through the psychic conduit, Julian perceived something else profoundly hidden. A terror, not of personal death or perpetual isolation, but of eventual forgetting, of losing the minutiae, of her people fading into indistinct forms. That consuming fear propelled her to construct the memory vaults, vast repositories containing every single detail. She preserved absolutely everything. Then the coalition arrived. Julian felt Sarath's fleeting, frantic hope. Other species, other civilizations, someone to share this intolerable burden. That hope endured precisely as long as the coalition's proposal was extended. They offered assistance. All she had to do was affix her signature. Too overwhelmed by sorrow to scrutinize the detailed stipulations, she signed. The binding immediately activated, imprisoning her, rendering her incapable of departure or action. The coalition secured the planet and abandoned her to languish for 5 millennia. The influx of memories subsided, the psychic damage fully inflicted. Sarath had been forced to relive every single loss while simultaneously experiencing Julian's empathetic reactions. She could no longer conceal her pain. Sarath pulled away sharply as the golden light dissipated. They remained on the floor, breathing heavily, her eyes glistening with moisture, tears creating clear channels through the pervasive dust. "You had no justifiable right," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "I know," Julian articulated, managing only the simple words. "I'm truly sorry. Sorry." A broken, humorless laugh escaped her. "You compelled me to fully remember. Actually remember, not merely possess the knowledge. I maintained that distance for thousands of years. I was required to, or I would descend into madness." Her voice cracked noticeably. "You forced me to genuinely feel it once more." She attempted to rise. Her legs refused to support her weight. Julian instinctively grasped her arm. She recoiled instantly from the tactile reminder that they had just shared the most profound, intimate experience conceivable. "Release me." Julian complied, releasing her arm but remaining close by. They sat amidst the renewed light. Above them, architectural panels silently slid aside, admitting shafts of amber sunlight. "I had no way of knowing it would unfold like that," Julian confessed. "The binding interprets requests with absolute literal precision," Sarath stated. "You desired to understand, so it ensured your understanding." She drew a shuddering breath. "It ensured I could not escape from your sorrow for individuals you never encountered." Her voice dropped significantly. "No one has genuinely mourned my people except me. Not for 5,000 years. The admission carried an immense cost." Fresh tears spilled over. The white markings on her skin pulsed with a faint, residual light. Julian cautiously reached out, then gently touched her shoulder. She did not attempt to withdraw. The heat radiated through his suit material. "They unequivocally deserved better," he stated firmly. "Someone to properly remember them." Sarath turned her head, the image of the cold goddess completely vanished. All that remained was an exhausted and grieving individual. "I am completely uncertain how to manage this," she confessed. "To experience this level of emotion and still effectively function. You are no longer obliged to endure it in isolation." The words lingered powerfully between them. Something fundamental had changed. A genuine connection had been established that transcended the obligatory binding. Sarath's hand rose slowly. Her fingers delicately brushed Julian's face. The touch was careful now. She traced the tear tracks on his cheek, her breath catching audibly. "You actually wept for them," she whispered, an element of pure astonishment in her voice. "Why would you do that?" "Because their existence held significance," Julian responded. "Because they lived and loved and constructed something truly magnificent." He met her golden eyes directly. "Because you loved them so profoundly and I felt the entirety of that love. How could I possibly refrain from grieving?" Something deep inside Sarath finally broke. Not her composure but a far deeper barrier. A separating wall between herself and human connection. Her hand moved to his shoulder, gripping tightly. "I despise you for this," she breathed, yet there was no genuine animosity in the statement. "I detest that you compelled me to feel. I can no longer ignore your empathy. You are the first in 5 millennia who has seen something in me other than a mere weapon or a terrifying monster. I perceive an individual who endured the utterly unendurable." Sarath's grip intensified. Her other hand quickly came up, clutching him with both hands, and her forehead sank against his chest plate. "I am so utterly exhausted," her voice was muffled, "exhausted from maintaining strength, from this crushing solitude, from pretending this weight is not absolutely crushing me." Julian's arms encircled her frame. She stiffened momentarily, then yielded and melted against him. The heat radiating from her was intense, penetrating even the suit's insulation. It felt intrinsically right. They remained in that embrace, two beings from profoundly disparate species and eras, finding completely unexpected solace. The temple continued its revival. Sunlight streamed through the activating panels, transforming the swirling dust motes into tiny golden galaxies. Eventually, Sarath slowly pulled away, her eyes still reddened, but the raw, agonizing distress was visibly receding. She looked at Julian with an expression bordering on sheer astonishment. "I cannot comprehend you," she stated. I have fulfilled requests for countless species. All of them sought dominance, sought absolute control. You could have asked for anything at all, yet you opted for. She shook her head slightly. You chose to suffer agony on my behalf. Because understanding holds greater importance than raw power, Julian replied. Your people deserve more than just the ruins I meticulously catalogue. It is vital to honor them correctly. To honor you. Sarath's breath caught sharply. Her hand rose, cupping his face with a sudden, genuine tenderness. Her thumb gently brushed his cheekbone. You are so incredibly fragile, she whispered. So easily broken. One final impulse and I could extinguish you. Yet you held me. Her eyes locked onto his. Extremely brave or profoundly foolish. Most likely both. A sound escaped her. Sarath was laughing. Genuine, unrestrained laughter. The sound completely transformed her expression, softening the rigid lines carved by millennia of anguish. Most likely both, she repeated, her voice lighter. Oh, Julian Rhodes, what exactly have you done to me? Julian was acutely aware of their proximity. Her hand gently cupping his face, those golden eyes holding entire universes, the intense warmth of her body, her breathing quick and shallow. Sarath, he managed, his voice suddenly husky. Julian, she replied, the sound of his name sending a wave of warmth through his core. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken connection. Her thumb traced the curve of his lower lip. Her pupils dilated visibly. The air between them became electrically charged. Then Sarath pulled back abruptly, rising in a single, fluid motion. Julian felt an immediate sense of emptiness at the loss of contact. We should begin exploring, she suggested, her voice regaining a measure of control, though it was now a thin veneer. The wish compelled me to share memories, but there is more here. Physical evidence. The memory vaults I meticulously constructed. She glanced downward, a flicker of vulnerability briefly crossing her face. I want to show you if you are still willing. Julian rose to his feet, his legs unsteady, his entire body wrung out from the intensity of the psychic connection, but he nodded firmly. Show me. Sarath's expression softened visibly. She extended her hand to him, an open offering devoid of any demand. Julian accepted it. Their fingers intertwined, and he immediately felt an echo of that earlier connection. It was no longer an overwhelming torrent, but something considerably gentler, a soothing warmth, a mutual awareness that extended beyond the merely physical. This way, Sarath instructed, leading him deeper into the colossal temple complex. They navigated corridors that had not felt the presence of footsteps for thousands of years. The architecture was breathtaking, featuring soaring ceilings adorned with intricate, complex carvings, and walls that softly glowed with an internal light source. Everything was scaled for beings significantly taller than humans. But Sarath's hand securely holding his was a comforting anchor. This was the essential core of our civilization, Sarath explained. Not just a command center but a comprehensive repository, a living monument to everything we represented. The corridor opened into a chamber so vast that Julian could not discern the far wall. Massive columns rose like gigantic trees, their surfaces covered in the identical white markings that decorated Sarath's skin. Between the columns, holographic displays flickered into vibrant life. Images filled the air, faces, locations, specific moments frozen in time. The memory vaults, Sarath stated. I spent centuries meticulously building them, recording every single detail, every individual, every achievement, even every mundane daily moment. Her grip tightened momentarily. I was terrified of the complete oblivion of forgetting. A hologram blossomed directly before them, depicting a vibrant marketplace scene. Julian could distinguish individual faces, an elderly merchant laughing, two young individuals clearly in love, a musician mid-song, her fingers expertly dancing across the instrument strings. I vividly remember her, Sarath said, gesturing toward the musician. Bill. She performed at my inauguration ceremony. Her music possessed the power to make stone weep. Her voice cracked slightly. She died during the initial wave of the contagion. I discovered her body in the conservatory, still clutching her instrument. Julian squeezed her hand gently. Sarath's eyes were visibly moist, but she refused to look away. Show me more, Julian said softly. Tell me about who they were. Sarath moved deliberately through the immense chamber, and the holograms dynamically shifted with her. Each image was accompanied by a narrative. Sometimes it was just a name and a brief snippet, sometimes entire detailed life histories. A scientist who had mapped distant, uncharted stars, a teacher who had made Sarath laugh during her demanding military training, a child who had drawn vibrant pictures of the Legion's latest victories. Julian listened intently to every single word, asked relevant questions, and made intellectual connections between the artifacts and architectural elements he had catalogued previously. Slowly, something transformative occurred in Sarath's expression. The raw, debilitating grief was still present, but it was now accompanied by something new, a restorative warmth, a genuine pleasure in the act of remembrance. She laughed, vividly recounting a stubborn council member who had argued vehemently with her for over 3 hours. She smiled, showing him detailed recordings of cultural festivals. "You are truly listening," Sarath observed, a sense of wonder in her voice. "Not merely hearing the data but genuinely listening." "Of course," Julian replied. "This is absolutely incredible. Your people were truly remarkable." "They were entirely ordinary," Sarath corrected gently. "And that, precisely, is what makes them remarkable. They were not distant gods or mythical legends, they were just people attempting to lead good lives." She touched one specific hologram, depicting a family gathered around a dinner table. "This small moment holds as much importance as any great accomplishment, perhaps even more." They continued their exploration deeper into the complex. Sarath showed him extensive art galleries, vast music libraries, and detailed scientific archives. She spoke of philosophical debates that had raged for generations, of cherished recipes passed down through families, and of children's games played in streets that now lay desolate. "I never once thought I would share any of this," Sarath admitted. "The coalition representatives, they simply did not care. They perceived only data, resources to be exploited, and they never once inquired about the people themselves." "Then they were simply fools," Julian stated plainly. Sarath immediately stopped walking and turned to face him fully, scrutinizing his face intently. Her hand gently came up to cup his cheek once more. "You are dangerous, Julian Rhodes," she said softly. "You make me desire things I had completely forgotten I was capable of wanting. Hope, meaningful connection, a future that is more than just bare existence. Is that so terrible?" "It is," when Sarath's words were abruptly cut off as a holographic display suddenly flickered an alarming red. Her entire body became instantly rigid. "Oh, what is it?" "The temple's perimeter sensors," she said, her voice now dangerously cold. "Something is rapidly approaching. Multiple vessels are dropping out of hyperspace." Julian's blood ran cold immediately. The coalition. Who else could it be? Sarath swiftly moved to the display, her fingers flying across the controls. Data streamed past her vision. "They must have automated alert systems. The moment I broke free, the moment the temple initiated primary power." She slammed her hand against the display panel in frustration. "They have had 5,000 years to meticulously prepare for this contingency. How many ships? 12 in the initial wave. More jumping in behind them." Her golden eyes blazed with intense fury. "A kill squad. They are here to eliminate any witnesses." Julian's mind raced. "How much time do we have?" "Hours, perhaps significantly less." Sarath turned to face him, her expression tormented. "Julian, I need to convey something vital to you. The binding, it is loosening its hold, but it is not completely gone. I am still fundamentally tied to you until all 3 wishes have been articulated. I cannot leave this planet without you. I cannot even utilize my full potential power without severely risking your life. Then we will devise a solution together. You don't fully grasp the situation." Sarath gripped his shoulders, her desperation evident. "They will murder you simply to get to me. You are human. Your species is part of the coalition. They will portray you as a rogue operative. No one will ever question your death." Julian met her gaze steadily. "So, what course of action do we take now?" Sarath stared back at him. Then something profound shifted in her demeanor. Absolute determination. "We unearth the truth," she declared. "The real, undeniable, damning truth. You observe the pattern. I have had 5 millennia to study precisely what transpired. I know the location of the evidence. Weapon signatures, official command orders, communications intercepted during the time of the genocide." Her voice gained a razor-sharp edge. "I know exactly what they perpetrated and who authorized the command orders. Can we access it within the time frame?" "The core archives are located in the lower vaults. It will consume time, but," her eyes narrowed intensely, "if we can gather the necessary data and transmit it before they arrive, it will become irrelevant what happens to us physically. The undeniable truth will be disseminated." "Transmitted where?" "Everywhere. To every coalition-aligned world, every autonomous system, every single news syndicate and global data hub." A fierce smile touched her lips. "They engineered the binding into a legal contract, deploying ancient statutory laws against me, but those very same statutes possess vulnerabilities. If I can conclusively demonstrate that they violated the terms, that they imprison me under fraudulent pretenses, that they actively concealed a systematic genocide, the binding will be utterly shattered, and so too will their illicit authority." Julian's heart pounded violently. How exactly do I contribute? The archive systems are encrypted with genetic safeguards. My DNA is required for access, however, the retrieval systems are structurally compromised. Sarath's hand found his once more. I require someone who intimately understands ancient technological repair. An archaeologist who dedicated his entire professional career to meticulously reassembling extinct civilizations. I possess that capability, Julian affirmed immediately. It will entail extreme peril. The lower vaults are structurally unsound. And if the coalition arrives before we successfully complete the transfer, her grip tightened perceptibly. Julian, I cannot guarantee your absolute safety. I am barely maintaining control over my power. The overwhelming rage, the profound grief, it is all critically close to breaking loose. I am aware, Julian stated. I place my trust in you regardless. Sarath's breath hitched noticeably. She pulled him close, their foreheads touching. The thermal intensity radiating from her was immense. But Julian remained rooted, refusing to withdraw. What? She whispered, the question strained. Why would you risk absolutely everything for people you never encountered? For me? Because it is the morally correct action, Julian asserted. Because your people are entitled to justice. Because you are deserving of true freedom. He pulled back slightly to meet her golden eyes. And because I have devoted 15 years to studying the dead. Perhaps it is time I extend assistance to the living. Something fiercely protective and deeply tender bloomed in Sarath's expression. She kissed him, a swift, intense contact filled with desperate promise and emotional urgency. When she drew back, her eyes were blazing with renewed purpose. Then let us proceed to prove that I am not the monster they manipulated everyone into believing, she declared. Let us show them the true repercussions of attempting to inter the truth forever. She immediately led him toward a descending passage that plunged deeper into the bedrock. As they moved, Julian's mind raced. The coalition was imminently approaching. They had a maximum of hours, and he was about to assist an ancient vampire goddess in exposing a colossal genocide that held the potential to irrevocably dismantle galactic civilization. Yet, as Sarath's hand secured his, warm, tangible and vividly alive, Julian possessed an absolute certainty that he had chosen the correct path. Some truths were demonstrably worth sacrificing one's life for, and some individuals were demonstrably worth surviving for. The passage abruptly opened into a gargantuan chamber. Unlike the illuminated vaults above, this area was dark, predominantly filled with colossal crystalline structures that pulsed with a faint, internal light. Archive cores. Thousands of them stretched endlessly into the shadows. The core evidence resides within those structures, Sarath indicated, gesturing toward the cores. Every action they took, every explicit command, every vessel that participated in the massacre. She looked directly at Julian. Help me reactivate them. Help me effectively show the entire galaxy the true nature of the coalition. Julian stepped forward, his archaeologist's mind already intensely analyzing the unique technology. Let us commence the work, he instructed. Sarath smiled, a fierce, captivatingly beautiful smile, imbued with hope for the very first time in 5,000 years. Thank you, she whispered softly. Then they descended together into the archives, urgently racing against both the clock and the incoming fleet, meticulously searching for irrefutable truth amidst the surrounding darkness. Julian's fingers moved swiftly across the archaic interface, actively decoding crystalline data matrices that had been dormant for millennia. Sweat beaded and dripped down his face. Beside him, Sarath steadily fed her unique genetic signature into the archive cores, her hands remarkably steady despite the palpable tension emanating from her entire form. This particular core is corrupted, Julian muttered, reviewing the error logs. The data appears fragmented and unstable. Bypass it entirely, Sarath directed. We require sufficient evidence to substantiate the systematic genocide, not every single peripheral detail. Concentrate strictly on authenticated command logs and distinctive weapon signatures. Julian transitioned to a different archive core. This one pulsed with a stable, rhythmic light. He immediately interfaced his external scanner, and a torrent of information streamed across his display. Ship manifests, precise targeting coordinates, verified kill confirmations. His stomach violently churned. Sarath, you must view this immediately. She moved instantly to his side, her breath catching audibly. The core contained direct communications between coalition fleet commanders, openly debating specific colony targets, discussing civilian population density, and calculating optimal strike patterns designed for maximum fatalities with minimized forensic evidence. The Calera colony, Sarath whispered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. They explicitly debated using biological weapons versus kinetic orbital strikes. They ultimately decided on biological agents because it would successfully mimic a natural plague outbreak. Her voice was now shaking severely. They systematically murdered 3 billion innocent beings and treated the entire operation as a mere logistical calculation. Julian's hand instinctively found hers, squeezing tightly. We will ensure that the entire galaxy is made aware of this. They continued their work in intense, focused silence, extracting data from core after core. Every successful retrieval revealed new layers of horrifying detail. Command orders personally signed by high-ranking Coalition Council members, intricate cover-up protocols, and explicit plans for Sarath's permanent imprisonment. This was far beyond just genocide. It was premeditated, meticulously planned, and officially authorized at the highest political and military echelons. What? Julian inquired, the word heavy with disbelief. Why would they commit this? Sarath's laugh was brittle and filled with bitter contempt. We possessed immense power. Our legion alone could have successfully resisted any coalition force they deployed, and critically, we possessed principles. We adamantly refused to join their ranks. We would not participate in the subjugation of weaker, developing species. Her fingers clenched tightly around the crystalline core she was working on. We stood as a potent example, a persistent reminder that power could be judiciously utilized for protection rather than ruthless domination. They could not tolerate that philosophical challenge. Consequently, they eradicated you and fabricated the facade of a tragic plague. Sarath's eyes blazed with fury. They presented themselves to the galaxy as saviors, quarantined the plague world, and imprisoned the dangerous, sole survivor. They established their galactic authority directly upon the corpses of my people. Julian's scanner emitted a sharp, conclusive beep. I have achieved critical mass. Command logs, verified weapon signatures, authenticated internal communications. Irrefutable, ironclad evidence is compiled. Then we transmit it now, Sarath declared, her fingers dancing rapidly across the interface controls. I am routing the data through every available relay within range. The Coalition will be utterly incapable of suppressing this catastrophic disclosure. The temple structure shuddered violently. Dust rained heavily from the ceiling above. What caused that? Sarath's face instantly went pale. They're already here. They are actively firing on the surface structure, attempting to fully collapse the temple before we can successfully initiate the transmission. Another colossal impact, closer and more jarring. The crystalline archives began to resonate loudly like massive bells. How much time do you require? 5 minutes to finalize the compilation. An additional 3 minutes to guarantee the transmission. Sarath's hands moved with terrifying speed. The temple's primary shields will hold the initial assault. A colossal explosion rocked the entire chamber. One archive core immediately shattered, spraying Julian with razor-sharp fragments. Sarath instantly grabbed him, powerfully pulling him away from the collapsing support structure. They are deliberately attempting to obliterate the archives, she exclaimed. They are fully aware of our current objective. Can they still halt the transmission? Not if I complete it now. Sarath's eyes met his, radiating intense power. But I must employ my full, unrestricted power. Maximum output. I can generate a localized shield to protect you, but you must remain critically close. Do not release your grip. Julian simply nodded once. Sarath pulled him tightly against her, one arm securely wrapped around his waist. Her other hand continued furiously working the controls. Intense heat radiated from her body in tangible waves. The white markings etched onto her skin blazed with incandescent light. Outside, the sounds of explosions grew closer and louder. The coalition forces were clearly abandoning any pretense of tactical precision. Almost there, Sarath muttered through gritted teeth. The chamber's main entrance exploded inward with catastrophic force. Heavily armed figures in coalition battle armor poured through the ruined opening, their weapons already raised. Stand down immediately. The lead soldier roared through his helmet speaker. Sarath's immense power violently erupted. The ambient temperature spiked by 50 degrees instantly. The air itself seemed to spontaneously ignite. A devastating wave of raw force exploded outwards from Sarath's body, catching the advancing soldiers mid-stride. Their specialized armor instantly warped and melted. Their energy weapons fused into useless slag. The soldiers were violently hurled backward, smashing against the far walls with sickening force. Julian gasped, momentarily overwhelmed by the terrifying proximity to such unbridled raw power. But Sarath's protective arm around him held firm, her localized shield entirely safeguarding him. He felt the intense heat, the explosive pressure, but suffered no physical harm. Transmission away, Sarath managed, her voice severely strained. It is successfully completed. The data is now rapidly disseminating across every network. More soldiers immediately poured through the entrance. Sarath moved instantly, placing herself directly in front of Julian, interposing her body between him and the incoming energy fire. Energy blasts splashed harmlessly against barriers of intensely superheated air that she projected. "We need to move immediately," she declared. "There is a critical emergency passage located directly behind that far wall." "How can you be sure they haven't already surrounded us?" "I'm not sure at all." Sarath's smile was fierce and defiant. "But I am finished with running, I am finished with hiding, and I am absolutely finished with permitting the coalition to dictate what happens next." She forcefully pulled Julian toward the far wall, her power blazing intensely around them. The remaining soldiers attempted pursuit, but Sarath made a sharp gesture and a massive section of the ceiling catastrophically collapsed, effectively blocking their path. They reached the wall. Sarath pressed her hand against the surface, and ancient mechanisms immediately activated. The stone split open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. She roughly shoved Julian through the opening, then swiftly followed, sealing the entrance behind her. The passage was cramped and intensely dark, illuminated only by the constant, unwavering glow of Sarath's bodily markings. They ran hard, Julian's legs burning with exertion. Behind them, muffled explosions indicated the coalition forces desperately attempting to breach the sealed passage. "They are going to completely bring the entire temple down around us," Julian panted breathlessly. "Let them attempt it," Sarath retorted. "The transmission is already proliferating rapidly. By this moment, it has reached a dozen critical relay stations. By the time we emerge onto the surface, it will be visible on 100 distinct worlds." The confined passage ascended steeply. Julian's lungs burned with desperate effort, but Sarath's hand in his pulled him onward, a relentless anchor. They burst out onto the surface just as the entire ancient temple complex began its catastrophic collapse. Coalition vessels circled menacingly overhead, their advanced weapon systems tearing into the deteriorating structure below. But their aggression was too late. The irrefutable evidence was now released. Julian and Sarath stood at the very edge of the devastation, silently watching the temple, her final physical connection to her people, crumble into dust and fire. "I'm sorry," Julian offered quietly. "Do not be," Sarath's voice was resolute and steady. "The memory vaults are gone, but they perfectly served their intended function. My people's comprehensive story will now be fully told. Their systematic deaths will be justly avenged." She turned toward him, a genuine smile curving her lips despite the horrific scene. "All of this is because of you. However, we are not safe, yet." "I am aware," Julian confirmed. She pulled him close, holding him firmly. "Julian, I must ask you something vital. You still possess the second wish and I require you to use it immediately, right now. What do you need me to wish for?" Sarath's golden eyes met his, fierce yet profoundly vulnerable. "I wish for you to possess the choice," Julian stated clearly. "Absolute, true choice, completely free from any binding or enforced obligation regarding what happens next." The golden luminescence of the binding flared brilliantly around them. Sarath gasped sharply as she felt the restrictive chains loosen significantly further. She could distinctly feel the freedom, the boundless possibility. She possessed the means to leave immediately, to escape, to save her own life and abandon Julian to face the consequences alone. But she did not move, she did not release her hold on him. "My choice," she whispered softly, "is to remain here." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. "Sarath, my choice is to engage in this fight. My choice is you." She kissed him then, a contact fierce, desperate, and entirely filled with profound promise. When she drew back, her eyes were blazing with immense power. "Now, let us show them precisely what occurs when you drive a goddess into a corner." Coalition vessels rapidly descended toward their exact location. But Sarath merely smiled, power intensely coiling around her like an electrical storm. And for the first time in 5,000 years she was completely alone no longer. The coalition ships plummeted like lethal predators descending upon wounded prey. Julian counted a minimum of 20, their weapon arrays pulsating with deadly intent. Behind them, the temple, 5,000 years of shared history and painful memory, was consumed by fire. "Remain directly behind me," Sarath commanded, her voice utterly steady despite the overwhelmingly impossible odds. Raw power coiled around her body like living fire, and the white markings on her skin blazed with incandescent light. "We are outnumbered by 20 to 1, Julian pointed out quickly. "I do not need to decisively defeat all of them," Sarath interrupted sharply. "I only need to procure sufficient time. The transmission is propagating rapidly. Every second we manage to survive, more galactic citizens will view the truth." The lead ship's external speakers crackled with static. "Surrender the human individual and immediately stand down. You are incapable of winning this confrontation. Commander Ray, I presume? Sarath's laugh was chillingly cold. I have dedicated 5 millennia to considering precisely what I would say when we finally met face to face. You believe you are protected by ancient law. You cannot directly kill. You cannot. The binding is actively dissolving, Sarath cut him off, her voice ringing with authority. Thanks entirely to Julian's wishes, I am now virtually free. And when I am fully released, Commander, you will learn firsthand why my people officially designated me their ultimate protector. The ships immediately opened fire. Sarath's power exploded outwards. The very atmosphere surrounding them instantly became a potent weapon. Superheated barriers vaporized incoming energy blasts, and localized pressure waves sent missiles tumbling harmlessly off course. She moved with fluid, terrifying grace, one hand expertly directing defensive shields while the other firmly pulled Julian closer to her side. I need you to utterly trust me, she insisted urgently. Completely. Are you able to do that? Julian nodded once, without hesitation. Sarath's hand found his face, cupping it gently. The third wish, Julian. I require it now. What do you need me to wish for? Her golden eyes met his, and within their depths Julian perceived 5,000 years of unrelenting suffering. But he also saw undeniable hope, emerging joy, and fierce, protective love. I wish for the truth of what transpired here to be known, Julian declared, each word deliberate, in a way that ensures the ultimate protection of both our respective peoples. The binding completely shattered. A dazzling burst of golden light erupted and flared violently from Sarath's body. When Julian managed to open his eyes, she was floating slightly above the ground, her long hair wildly whipping around her face. The mystical chains that had held her captive for millennia were gone entirely. She was free and she was breathtakingly magnificent. Thank you, she whispered and kissed him, a kiss gentle yet full of profound promise. Then, she turned decisively to face the descending coalition fleet, her voice ringing out with the terrifying authority of a newly unleashed goddess. I am Sarath, commander of the last legion, the final survivor of a people you viciously murdered. Her words carried clearly across the ravaged battlefield. You arrogantly believed you could bury the truth forever. You were profoundly mistaken. The massed ships momentarily hesitated. Sarath granted them no further time. She ascended higher, power rapidly accumulating around her form like a nascent star. The earth beneath Julian's feet began to fracture, ancient defense mechanisms responding to her newly unleashed will. Defense grids meticulously engineered by her people decades ago roared into activation. You are presented with a clear choice, Sarath projected loudly. Stand down immediately and prepare to face justice, or actively engage in combat and discover firsthand why the coalition feared my species sufficiently to eradicate us entirely. We are operating under official orders, Commander Ray's voice crackled back over the comms. You are to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. Then you have made a grievous error in your selection. Sarath's immense power detonated outwards. Julian watched in overwhelming awe as she moved through the coalition fleet like an inevitable force of nature. She meticulously avoided taking life, yet that was unnecessary. Ships instantly lost critical power. Weapon systems fused together. Specialized hull armor buckled and melted under impossible thermal energy. She was simultaneously omnipresent, a blinding figure of righteous vengeance and destructive capability. However, the sheer number of enemy vessels was overwhelming. Despite her godlike power, Sarath remained fundamentally alone. Not alone, Julian corrected under his breath. His hand instinctively found his communication device. This is Julian Rhodes, xenoarchaeologist, transmitting from a world the coalition placed under false quarantine. They orchestrated a massive genocide here 5 millennia ago. If anyone is receiving this signal, if anyone cares about universal justice, we desperately require immediate assistance. We need definitive witnesses. For a long, tense moment, the airwaves remained silent. Then, his communicator violently exploded with incoming replies. Vessels were rapidly entering the system's jump point. Not just a handful but dozens. Independent vessels, free traders, even several ships originating from coalition member worlds whose crews had already viewed the rapidly spreading transmission. The coalition fleet suddenly found itself severely outnumbered. Stand down immediately, a new voice commanded, strong, authoritative, and distinctly female. This is Captain Saras of the independent cruiser Starborn. We have verified the provided evidence. We know exactly what you have done. The entire galaxy knows the truth. Ray's voice returned, all previous confidence utterly vanished. This is an internal coalition operational matter. This is a systematic genocide, Captain Saras immediately interrupted. And we will not allow you to conceal another one. The coalition ships held their rigid formation for another brief, tense moment. Then, slowly they began to initiate a strategic retreat. Not all of them. A few desperate holdouts attempted to fight, but Sarath dealt with them efficiently, surgically, neutralizing their threat without a single confirmed casualty. When the last coalition vessel limped out of the system's boundary, Sarath gently descended back to the ravaged surface. She landed softly beside Julian, her immense power diminishing to a gentle, residual glow. She appeared physically exhausted, but vitally alive in a way he had never witnessed before. "You sent out a desperate call for assistance," she observed, profound wonder coloring her voice. "You taught me that you didn't have to face this challenge alone anymore," Julian replied simply. Sarath immediately pulled him into her arms, holding him with fierce intensity. They had survived. They had won this crucial battle. The truth was irreversibly disseminated. Vessels were now landing rapidly, journalists, official investigators, independent observers. They would demand statements, demand evidence, require complete testimony. But for this singular, stolen moment, Julian and Sarath simply held one another as the twin suns sank over the smoking ruins of her world. "What exactly happens next?" Julian asked quietly into her shoulder. "I honestly do not know," Sarath admitted truthfully. "For 5,000 years, my sole objectives were ultimate freedom and complete revenge. Now I possess one and I no longer require the other." She pulled back slightly to look directly into his eyes. "What is it that you wish to happen next?" Julian reflected on his prior life, meticulously cataloging ruins, studying long-dead civilizations, perpetually isolated. Then he looked at Sarath, standing before him. "I want to assist you in rebuilding," he stated firmly. "Not your specific civilization, that is irrevocably gone, but something entirely new. A permanent memorial, a place where people can truly learn about your culture, properly honor them, and I also want," he hesitated only momentarily, "I want to see exactly where this connection between us leads." Sarath's smile was absolutely radiant. "A memorial. I find that deeply appealing." Her hand tenderly cupped his face. "And as for where this goes, Julian Rhodes, I spent 5,000 years deliberately forgetting how to experience hope, how to truly love, how to place my trust in another. You have retaught me all three in a matter of hours." She leaned in very close. "I am uncertain exactly what we are or what we will ultimately become, but I know, absolutely, that I want to find out." She kissed him as the setting sun painted the sky in magnificent shades of amber and molten gold, as independent ships landed around them, and as the entire galaxy received the undeniable truth. It was a kiss overflowing with promise, saturated with possibility, a tangible beginning to a future neither had ever dared to imagine. When they finally separated, Captain Saras was already approaching, holding a recording device prominently. "Are you both ready to finally tell your complete story?" she inquired. Sarath looked directly at Julian. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Together they turned resolutely to face the assembled galaxy. "Yes," Sarath confirmed. "It is past time the universe knew what truly occurred here. Time they knew about my people. Not merely as victims but as they genuinely were, protectors, innovative builders, hopeful dreamers." She took a profound breath, and Julian felt her hand tighten reassuringly around his. "My designation is Sarath," she began. "And this is the complete history of a great civilization the galaxy carelessly allowed to forget." As she spoke, Julian watched her transform fully. The grief was still visibly present, the underlying anger, the deep-seated pain. But those emotions no longer served to define her essence. She was much more than just the last survivor of a deceased species. She was a formidable woman who had found the capacity to hope again, to love again, and ultimately, to truly live again. When she finally concluded her testimony several hours later, when the journalists had meticulously secured their footage and the official investigators possessed their final, compiled evidence, Sarath turned to Julian with a grateful smile that held all the combined warmth of twin suns. "Thank you," she said simply, "for absolutely everything." "Thank you," Julian replied, "for allowing me to assist, for trusting me completely, for choosing to remain here." "Always," Sarath confirmed. They stood together at the extreme edge of the ruins, watching as the very first full dawn in 5,000 years broke gloriously over a world that would finally, irrevocably, be remembered for what it truly was. The temple was lost, the memory vaults were entirely destroyed, but the undeniable truth now lived on. And so did they. Together.